Hey, howdy hey, and welcome to another The police, the law, the filth, the pigs, the porkers, the bears, the bobbies, the heat, 5-0, Old Bill, or the wallopers.
Alright, meow.
Many of us rely on their services, or at least their general presence, to feel safe and reassured. And for good reason. They enforce the law, they investigate crime, sometimes putting their lives on the line in the process. They'll even come to your school and tell your 9-year-old self about road safety.
Hands on top of your heads. Nobody move.
Of course, not everyone is thrilled with the police, and that's also for good reason. My 9-year-old self is now my 25-year-old self, and she sees too many stories about police brutality, violence towards citizens in custody, shooting of unarmed black men, indifference towards those who are the target of clear and obvious bigotry. It's often brushed away as those officers being a few bad apples, but as the saying goes, a few bad apples spoil the barrel. It's complicated. We depend on a system of policing, and therefore we need police officers. But we also need for standards and accountability for those people to be extremely high. There are movies that explore the darker side of the force.
The dark side of the force is a pathway to many of
No, not like that. Some examples I saw include Crash, in which a young idealistic cop comes to find he's just as prejudiced as his superior, who himself gets a redemption arc of sorts by saving a woman he molested from a burning car. It's not the most nuanced movie. There's also the French film La Haine, in which a youth from the banlieue pledges to execute a cop as vengeance for his friend Abdul, who was injured by cops in the riots. This scene in particular strikes a nerve, and as the camera never moves, we are forced to watch the whole terrible sequence unfold. My college French teacher told me that this clip is used for real-life officers in training as an example of what not to do or what not to tolerate in their workplace. I can't really remember. I bring these films up though because films tend to have a differing view of the police depending on the genre. In dramas and thrillers, they tend to closely examine the harmful and willful practices of the police, whereas in horror what tends to happen is that the cops are merely incompetent. Here is a typical slasher plot. A group of teens are just teening around one night when a supernatural slasher killer with unreasonably strong forearms turns up and starts to pick off the teens one by one. Our protagonists try to contact the police, and assuming the phone lines have not already been cut, the police will not hasten to the scene of the crime because they don't believe what they're hearing.
Well, it's going to take a hell of a lot more than a lame prank like this to get Curtis Mooney to throw in his badge.
This is a prank call. Kids are always messing around on Friday the Halloweenth of Oktoberfest. Maybe one of the teens, running away covered in his mate's blood, is mistakenly arrested, making him a sitting duck for the killer. By the time an officer does turn up, he will survey the carnage and go confidently strolling in without backup because don't worry, he's got things under control now.
Police, open up!
In case you haven't guessed, this is one of those horror movie cliches that infuriates me the most. And it isn't just restricted to horror either. I can't watch Die Hard without screaming at the stupid TV because there is clearly a terrorist situation going on, you incompetent shit! And yes, I call it a cliche and not a trope because the more we see this played out in fiction, the more tiresome and frustrating it gets. Even audience members with no knowledge of police protocol whatsoever outstrip the fictional officers in terms of common sense. Let us examine the Prom Night remake. Spoilers. Our principal character is Donna, whose family was murdered by a man who was obsessively in love with her. On the night of her high school prom, he breaks out of prison, then eludes hotel staff, security, and cops with his cunning disguise of a shave and a baseball cap. Even knowing that this man will be after Donna, the police decide not to evacuate the building immediately, leading to several deaths. Then at the end of the night, rather than I don't know, keeping Donna at the station for a bit, they drive her home and station a couple of cops around the building to keep an eye out. You know, because she'll be fine there. It's not the first place the killer will look for Donna, and I'm sure the killer won't quietly kill the only cop stationed in a car out front. Oh wait, he does. Of course, this psycho appears in Donna's bedroom and wrestles her into a closet, where the other cop fails to check. Yes, there was a scream from the other room that distracted him. Contrivance, but how long does it take to open a cupboard door anyway? He neglects to open a cupboard door in the room where Donna has suddenly gone missing. I never understood the narrative worth of writing in the repeated failings of a law enforcement organization, so instead of merely ranting on the subject, like I have been doing, I will seriously consider it. So, why are the police, more often than not, portrayed as useless? Well, I think it comes down to a couple of things. For the time being, let us assume that the police in horror movies are not as powerless and stupid as they appear. First of all, in my experience anyway, the police cannot flourish in a scary environment because very rarely are they the protagonists. They function in horror movies as they do in the real world, as the people you call when trouble is brewing. Because of this, they're not the primary targets of the killer, and they don't have the opportunity, as the protagonists do, to figure out what their rules are, how they operate, and what, if anything, could be their weakness. Now, if the police were given a more central focus, I have a feeling they would be too grossly overpowered to be satisfying as protagonists. Incompetence aside, we the public know that police officers have the training, they have the weaponry, they have the fast cars, and they have the advantage of coordinating to work as a team. It works in action films if everyone is packing heat, but not in horror so much. So that's point one. Police have to be on the sidelines. Point two is that the police may appear more incompetent depending on their adversary. They may be ill-equipped to deal with 50-foot blobs or razor-toothed nightmare creatures. In this case, their incompetence, in quotation marks, comes from being outmatched, so forget all those advantages I just listed, turns out they don't work against these monsters. In Jeepers Creepers, a movie where police believe our protagonists about the danger afoot enough to investigate quickly, and come in with a decent amount of weaponry, they are nonetheless decimated by the creeper. Another notable example can be found in Silent Hill, both the original game and the first movie adaptation. Sybil is a character who befriends the in-game protagonist, Harry Mason, early on, even offering him a gun before splitting up. This makes sense, as, again, you're meant to fight the monsters alone, and having a cop firing bullets alongside you kind of defeats the purpose. In the movie, Sybil joins forces with Rose, the replacement for Harry Mason, and fights the cult members, but ultimately she is overcome and burned to death. She recognizes the dangerousness of the environment, and yet cannot overcome it. It is perhaps unreasonable to expect mere mortals to be capable of gunning down a supernatural threat, no matter who they are. In this case, the uselessness of police serves as an example. If the emergency services are helpless at a time like this, then surely our main characters are doubly doomed. But what about when the police fail on account of being unforgivably stupid and reckless? This is what raises my ire, along with most people's probably. Sometimes the cops just suck, no question about it. It's been done so much that satirical and comedy horrors choose to play it up, giving us the bungling sheriff from Scream and the maddening party cop from Cabin Fever. Why does this cliché keep getting resurrected? Well, point three, I believe this is done to tap into a fear that almost everyone has, that nobody is coming to save you if you're in a life-threatening situation. And unfortunately, this happens in real life too. You have police officers in our world who don't take stalking claims seriously and refuse to grant a restraining order because it can't be all that bad. Sure enough, this happens a lot in stalker movies. The police force in Fatal Attraction basically tell Dan Gallagher that he got himself into this mess and he'll have to get himself out, and only take him seriously when his goddamn child is abducted. In our world, police and first responders have hung up on desperate callers for being silent, or even for swearing too much, despite the fact that, you know, their father's having a heart attack or something and they might be a bit flustered. And in the movies, sometimes the police hang up. In our world, police sometimes get the wrong man and thereby cease to look for the real culprit, and it happens in the movies too. Helen is arrested for being covered in the blood of one of Candyman's victims and is slung in an insane asylum. Tree is arrested in Happy Death Day, trapping her in the cop car, all gift-wrapped for the killer. And sometimes in our world, the police act unwisely or ignore certain parts of their training. And who does it affect the most? Us. As I said before, we depend on the police to do their job effectively as they should, and we rightly fear what will happen to us if they don't. Because so many children are raised to look at the police as an authority equal to or greater than their own parents, it's so much more devastating when they fail us, accidentally or on purpose. This is a topic that retains its relevancy to this day. As recently as 2015, a Gallup poll indicated that a greater percentage of Americans had very little or no confidence in the police. Though there has since been an overall rise in confidence, there's also been a drop amongst liberals, Hispanics, and adults under the age of 35. Darn millennial snowflakes killing the confidence industry. So with all the civil unrest in the world, I can't see this trope/cliché going away anytime soon. And I'm often told to kill my frustrations with stupid police in movies with the phrase, "It's only a movie." But movies don't exist in a vacuum. They're meant to show us the wants, wills, and more importantly, the fears of our society. Speaking of which, what's horror up to these days? What are we afraid of now? Other human beings, you say? Cults, politicians?
I was watching this movie called Freak Night, or some type of night, but it was about vampires. As I'm watching this movie, and then you can tell how stupid it is because it's 1 in the morning. So I'm watching my TV, these kids watching their TV, vampire kill on their TV. And that's the way it is in our life. It ain't working unless you got faith.
Well, I can't say I'm shocked. Thank you for watching this video essay. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, let me know what I should do next.
You have the right to remain silent.
I'm thinking of either tackling the age of victims in horror movies, or whether or not horror movies should have trigger warnings like modern TV shows do. Well, that's all. Have a nice day, and I'll see you soon.